How much of narcissistic behavior can be explained and understood by the fact it could just very well be a very well enabled behavior that is highly rewarded? This is the question I'm going to wrestle with today. Even though I'm not a psychologist or a professional, these are just my views and opinions on this particular subject. Over the years, dealing with and working with narcissists, I have often wondered, could this maladaptive behavior, could it simply be a highly rewarded series of behaviors or combinations that people have learned, and the group around them more or less enables these behaviors to continue? Now, I don't deny some narcissists are traumatized, and I do wonder about the genetic predisposition towards narcissism. However, I have to wonder if it's really a society problem or a problem with our civilization. Could it be that some individuals are more or less encouraged to become narcissists? Think in the past. For example, you had different classes of society, and different classes were expected to act differently. They had different social expectations. So could it be that these expectations were different, that these individuals behaved differently because of society pressure or society expectations? And I thought about this, and I thought about some of the changes that have been going on in society, and even some of our best online experts have pointed this out. It used to be narcissism was the domain of men. Women in the past weren't narcissistic, or very few of them were narcissistic. Could it be that they were subjected to different social pressures? Another example, alcoholism is also increasing among women. Could it be that society standards have changed, and thus some of these behaviors are now more acceptable, and thus women develop both narcissistic behaviors and alcoholism as a result? Now, I'm not saying this is correct. I'm not saying this is right or moral. But in the past, if a man was to act narcissistically, it wasn't really looked down upon or frowned upon as much. Think back to the Victorian times, or maybe even the Wild West. If a man got drunk on the weekend, no one would be surprised. If a man became belligerent or started acting narcissistically, especially if he was very successful, he might even get encouragement for this behavior. Now imagine a Victorian woman getting blackout drunk with her friends on the party side of town, smoking cigars and boasting about how much money they make. This simply would not happen. Now, if you go back to, let's say, the 1940s, 1920s, or earlier, if a man had a mistress, I'm not saying this was correct, some of these men were actually encouraged or even joked about this behavior. Now, can you imagine a woman in the Victorian era boasting about having multiple partners or having multiple affairs and bragging about it? This simply wasn't done. Maybe for the exception of royalty, but this really wasn't done on the most part. So could these stricter standards in the past, I'm not saying double standards are good. What I am saying is it possible that these stricter standards kept women safe or protected them from developing narcissism and developing alcoholism and other drug problems because of these stricter standards that they were subjected to? Do you think Victorian women, for example, would socialize with a woman who was constantly partying, constantly getting blackout drunk, and constantly sleeping around? Think of these upper class Victorian ladies. Would they continue to socialize with this woman? Probably not. But now in our society, not only is it socially allowable for a 20-year-old male to go out, get blackout drunk, a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old male to get blackout drunk, it's not uncommon to see middle-aged women doing the same behavior. So could society pressures change the way people behave? By the simple fact, it's allowable now, and it's also openly encouraged. Could this change the game or change society as a whole? This is just one example. Or another example is the dysfunctional family unit. As we know, in the dysfunctional family unit, the children are expected to fulfill different roles or different jobs. The two prime examples is the golden child and the scapegoat child. It's almost like these two children have two different rule books that they read out of. The golden child is encouraged to act narcissistically. Their needs come first. Their goals, their dreams come first at the expense of others. They're idolized by their parents. Their parents put them on a pedestal and they turn them into their idol, and they very often try to live vicariously through the golden child. Now, the scapegoat child takes the blunt of the stress, and people in the family unit dump their problems on the scapegoat child. And the scapegoat child often become codependents because they're taught to believe other people's actions and other people's problems are their problems. So not only are they responsible for themselves, they're responsible for everybody around them. So they're constantly helping people, trying to heal other people, and trying to keep the peace. Where the golden child, on the other hand, because of their set of rules and their set of expectations, it's all about them, all about what they want to do. Where the scapegoat or the codependent, on the other hand, it's what they can do for others. If they look after others enough, then they might get their needs met. So by having these different standards, it's not hard to see why the golden child would become a narcissist, while the scapegoat child would become a codependent. It's really not hard to see why these different standards would produce a different end result. Now imagine a bunch of grown-ups, a bunch of grown-up adults, whether this is in the workplace, in the office, or on a sports team perhaps. Now imagine you're in charge, and you subject different individuals to different sets of rules. Not different jobs, but different expectations in their behavior. More than, okay, this guy's more senior, this guy's more experienced, I expect more from this individual, I'm going to give him more responsibility and let him be more independent. No. What if you treated everyone in this group very differently and gave them very different rules? this person has to show up on time. This other person, if they're late, who cares? This other person, I'm going to give a lot of responsibility. This other person, next to no responsibility. And so forth. Do you think over time you can make subtle changes to these individuals' personality and overall behavior by changing expectations and rewards for their actions? This person gets punished if they do X, Y, and Z, where this person, on the other hand, you look the other way. Now, that other person, if they do such and such, you give them a reward instead. Do you think over time, could that alone make profound changes to someone's personality through ongoing training, repetition? Do you think this could actually make lasting changes? That's the question I put forth.